Hello and welcome back to the newest version of the house garden. I wanted to take a few minutes to share our new garden space with you and show you how we've transformed our small backyard into the kitchen garden that inspires many of the recipes we'll be continuing to share with you from my other channel, Salsas and More. Because the space is so limited, we decided to build elevated raised beds. These 5 beds took about 12 hours to build, and the materials run about $100 for each bed. It's an involved process, but they should last several years before they need to be replaced. I'll share a video soon on how I built them. Now, filling these beds can be a project by itself. Each of the beds is about 4 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 16 inches deep, so they hold about 10 cubic feet of garden soil or compost. To help reduce the amount that I needed to buy, I filled the bottom 6 inches of each bed with leaves, twigs, and yard clippings, which reduced the soil need to about 8 cubic feet. So we decided to use the square foot gardening method, which calls for a special soil mixture using peat moss, vermiculite or perlite, and compost in equal parts. So for each bed we had about 8 cubic feet of material, and you can see here we're mixing it up, and after a few minutes of mixing and a few more minutes of lifting and filling the beds are ready for planting. So here's a look at our tomato starts. We actually started a pretty good variety of tomatoes and peppers for the garden this year. And this is my process for up-potting the starts from the small cells into solo cups. Actually, I did this a little bit wrong as I germinated and started my tomatoes and peppers in regular garden soil rather than using a sterile starter mix. You can see that we use the regular garden soil to germinate and then up pot instead of using that starter or a bagged potting soil. But as you can see later on in the video, the plants still did pretty nicely. I'll definitely switch to starter mix this year, but you know, it worked. The nice part about these tomato plants is that I had multiple tomatoes in each cell, so I was able to separate them out and divide them and get more plants than I could actually have used. I gave away a bunch of tomatoes. And as you can see from the process, I planted them quite deep so that better roots could form along the stems that are buried deep in the dirt.
It's clear to see from up here. The world seems small.
And then once we had all the up potting complete, the plants went back under the grow lights for a few more weeks before hardening off and taking out to the garden. Alright, so let's take a tour through the beds and see what we're able to start this year. As we swing through, you can see we started a couple of great plants along the edge of the fence. We're actually going to train those vines up along the fence behind the beds and also along the deck rails and see if we can get them going and get a little bit of fruit in our garden. Here we have 2 zucchini plants that are started in a container. Hopefully there will be enough space in there for those 2. I don't know if there's quite enough space for 2 full plants though. The long ground bed that we planted along the fence has a variety of vegetables, along with some burrowing invaders. We'll have to work on our pest control. Along the back of the bed, we have a variety of Tomatillo plants. Now those will grow quite large and quite bushy, so we'll be staking and trellising those up along the back of the bed to try to control some of the growth. But important part with tomatillos obviously is you have to have more than one plant. They're not self-fertile, so you have to have multiple plants to ensure a good crop. The front of the bed features a variety of green leafies. We have spinach, we have arugula, leaf lettuce, and some oregano along the side. And then on the remainder of this right side of the ground bed, we have 4 cherry tomato plants. Again, those are indeterminates that we will train up a trellis line vertically on one stem. You can see that the tomato plants did quite nicely even with being started in regular garden soil, so sometimes mistakes even still work. The next section of the ground bed, another 8-foot section, features white and red onions in the front of the bed and 8 more varieties of tomatoes along the back of the bed. And then we also have 2 yellow squash in a similar container. Again, same question, will there be enough space for 2 full squash plants? This corner bed is going to feature our strawberries and some herbs along the bottom row. I've got garlic started here for now, along with a variety of basil and thyme, parsley, and sage. We'll see how those grow throughout the year. But that bed actually I threw together in about half an hour with scrap lumber that was left over from some other projects. So nice little 3-tiered strawberry bed. So the elevated beds give us the opportunity to have a huge variety of vegetables. Not only that, but we also utilized a pretty good variety of containers for herbs and leafy greens. Our first bed has 4 varieties of peppers in the back, along with a second planting of radish and some marigolds. You can see we utilized the shady spots between beds for cilantro and for some more tender herbs. You know that cilantro needs a little bit of shade. Doesn't really do well with a lot of heat directly on it, or else it'll bolt quickly, but these did pretty well in between the beds. So bed 2 has another selection of peppers, from some sweet and mild to some hot chilies. We love chili peppers. We use them a lot in our cooking every day. And we actually featured a lot of these peppers in my cooking channel, Salsas and More. So if you're interested in some recipes for salsas or some great Mexican food, check out my other channel, Salsas and More. I'll include a link in the comments below so you can check those out. This tomato is an Amish paste tomato plant. It's an indeterminate variety that produces a really fleshy fruit with very few seeds. We're going to string trellis this again up a single line, single stem, up the fence, and see how it produces. The container of arugula bolted a little bit early. It's a really good thing it matures quickly because I can restart it and succession plant it very quickly. Bed 3, you guessed it, more peppers. We have, along with cilantro and marigolds, we do have some cayenne and some spicier peppers in this bed. We ended up buying a couple of varieties from a local greenhouse, and they're doing really well too, compared with the starts that we had from our seed starting earlier in the season. And again, you can see in between the beds, we continue to utilize that space for cilantro and parsley. And you can see how those tender plants really enjoy the shaded spots in between. The next bed has a mixture of cucumbers, dill, winter squash, peas, and Swiss chard. And on the back of the bed, I built a really simple PVC and twine trellis to help train the sweet peas up and vertical. It also helped with the cucumbers. They were able to climb and trellis up that as well. But since we're, again, gardening in such a small space, it's important that we use the vertical growing as much as possible. So real simple trellis, easy to build, took about $10 worth of material and about 30 minutes worth of time to get it together. But they were able to climb up and utilize that vertical space pretty well. And again, on our last bed, I used another trellis of the same style to help support the purple beans that we grew. Those climbed the twine beautifully, did really well on the back row of that bed. But sharing space in that bed, we also had yellow wax beans and beets. The beets didn't do as well as I would have liked. I planted them late, and then we had some warm weather that affected the root development. The leaves were spectacular, but the actual beet root were very tiny. And here we've got a section of the garden bed where we are succession planting some peppers that I rescued from a local garden stand after we harvested out the radishes from this first bed. So again, we utilize square foot gardening methods for the beds that we built, and that allows for really dense planting in a small area. The 8 square foot on the left side holds 8 tomatoes and 72 onion sets. On the right side, we have 4 tomatoes, 4 tomatillos, 18 spinach, 18 leaf lettuce, oregano, arugula, and annual flowers. And to better utilize this space, I only planted indeterminate tomatoes. These are vining tomatoes that continue to grow throughout the season and produce fruit all year long. I devised a wire and twine trellis from the bed to the top of our fence, and pruned each plant to a single stem to control growth upward. I attached an eye hook to the bed at each plant location, about 12 to 15 inches, and ran twine vertically to a 12 gauge wire that was strung along the top of the fence. As the tomatoes grow, they're gently wound around the twine to trellis upward. It definitely helps save space, and it helps create a healthy growing environment for the plants. As the plants get to about 4 foot tall, I will allow some side growth and not prune every sucker. This will increase our yield and still maintain a nice healthy plant. The other thing I will do is trim off and prune the bottom leaves up to about a foot tall on the plant to create more airflow along the bottom of the tomato plants. And as you can see from the size of this Cherokee purple tomato, I think we did pretty well with our planting this year. Look at that monstrosity.
That looks cool. Wow.
Both hands. So I don't think there's anything like harvesting fresh vegetables from your own garden. I love the taste of fresh peas and beans, especially knowing the hard work that goes into growing them every year. One of my favorite plants to grow this year was the Mucho Nacho chili. It's a variety of jalapeno with a little bit spicier kick. They were great flavor in a lot of our salsas. Plus, it was just fun to keep saying Mucho Nacho. It produced a lot of medium-sized jalapenos, and again, they were a great complement to a lot of the dishes that we cook every day. So we do also have some fruit containers that in our garden varieties. We have 2 containers that are full of raspberries, and they did really well this year. I don't think any garden would be complete without having some raspberries or strawberries somewhere in between rows. Yeah, these produce really nice with really large sweet berries. And then here's a look at some more of the fresh harvest we had over the year. Again, the beets, they didn't do as well as I would like. We're going to do some different things with them this year, plant them a little earlier. But we had a pretty good summer. We had the beets. We were able to harvest some good zucchini and potatoes. We had a little bit of everything. Just really looking forward to the next season of improving what we may have done wrong and continuing to expand the size just a little bit. So as you can see, you don't need acres and acres and acres of land to have a really great garden space. With a few beds, a mix of containers and some pots, and trellising to grow vertically, you can grow a lot of food on less than 1/4 of an acre. Thanks for joining me on a tour of our 2020 garden. I'm really looking forward to 2021 and some of the changes we're going to make, and the chance to share some of our experiences with what we're doing in our backyard. So, happy gardening, and we'll see you next time.